Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're diving deep into this whole thing with the alleged Israeli attack on Iran.
Yeah, this is a big one. Lots of folks are on edge about this.
You know, you guys send in some really interesting analysis from open source intelligence experts.
Oh, yeah.
And some video footage even.
Wow, so we're talking like a front row seat to history here.
Pretty much. So let's unpack all this and see what we can learn.
Yeah, what's really fascinating to me about all this is how this whole event challenges everything we thought we knew about military power, especially in the Middle East. I mean, we might be seeing a total shift in power, alliances, strategies, not only in the region, but globally.
Yeah. It does feel like we're at some kind of tipping point.
Definitely.
Your sources seem to be suggesting that there was a massive missile attack launched towards Iran.
Yeah, seems like it.
And all signs point to Israel. Military bases, power grids, oil facilities. I mean, it looks like they were going for the jugular.
Yeah, and the videos you sent are really, they're pretty chilling. I mean, imagine seeing these streaks of light cutting across the night sky, knowing that those are missiles carrying immense destructive power.
I can't even imagine.
The experts who analyze this kind of footage, they seem pretty convinced that these missiles, they're consistent with the types that Israel has.
Interesting. So then we come to the mystery, right?
Lay on me.
Because despite all these missiles flying around, there's like zero visual confirmation of any major damage inside Iran.
You're kidding.
I know. It's like they just disappeared.
You'd think we'd be seeing more, right? Like widespread devastation.
Exactly. Massive explosions, smoke, cities in darkness. It's almost as if the missiles just vanished.
Well, that's the million-dollar question.
Yeah.
And your sources, they point to a real game changer here.
Okay, I'm listening.
Russia.
Russia?
Yep. Expert commentary suggesting that Russia might have stepped in and provided Iran with, like, really advanced intelligence and air defense support.
Yeah.
We're not talking just basic radar. Think satellite imagery, giving Iran real-time tracking of those incoming missiles, maybe even some electronic warfare capabilities to mess with the missiles' guidance systems.
So basically, Russia might have helped Iran set up the super effective shield that intercepts the missiles before they could even hit anything.
That's the theory. So on the one hand, you've got Israel saying, yeah, mission accomplished, but not showing any proof.
And on the other, you have Iran seemingly totally fine, maybe because Russia's got their back.
Exactly. It's a real head-scratcher. And it makes you wonder, has the balance of power actually shifted? Is Russia calling the shots now?
It's a crazy thought. I mean, what are other countries thinking? Like Turkey, the Arab states, are they watching this and rethinking their whole relationship with Israel and Iran?
I bet they are. This could be like a total realignment of alliances in the Middle East right before our eyes. It's almost too early to tell for sure, but there's no doubt that something big is happening.
And then there's the psychological side of all this. I mean, think about Hezbollah or the Houthis, groups that have been fighting Israel for years. Seeing Israel potentially fail like this has got to be a huge morale boost.
Oh, absolutely. Think about it. It's like, remember the 1980 Winter Olympics when that underdog U.S. hockey team beat the Soviets? No one thought they could do it, but they did. This alleged attack, if it really was a failure, it has that same feeling. It challenges the whole idea that Israel can't be beat. And it gives hope to those who thought Israel was just too powerful to overcome.
Yeah, I get that. The idea of unbeatable Israel being toppled is powerful. It makes you wonder, what's the long-term effect going to be, not just for Israel's enemies, but for Israel itself?
That's the key, right? Your sources highlight this story, a really powerful one, about this Israeli bulldozer driver. He was a former paratrooper, and he ended up taking his own life.
Oh.
Yeah. The reports suggest that he was deeply troubled by, the things he was ordered to do against people who were labeled terrorists. It's a dark look into what's happening inside the Israeli military, the toll this conflict is taking on people.
It's tragic. Makes you think about the choices those on the front lines have to make, the pressure they must be under.
It really does.
So could this incident be a sign of a deeper problem within the Israeli military, like a moral crisis or something?
That's a good question, and it ties into this whole idea of internal dissent within Israel. Your sources suggest that there are growing divisions both within the government and the military about how to handle this conflict. You've got some pushing for a stronger response, a show of force.
To prove they're still in control.
Exactly. But then you've got others who are saying, hold on, let's be careful here. We don't want to start a bigger war.
So even though Israel's trying to look strong internationally, they're dealing with all this tension behind the scenes. It seems that way. Makes you wonder how this internal struggle is going to affect their decisions and how they navigate this whole geopolitical mess. And that's something we're going to dig into a lot more in the next part of our deep dive.
I can't wait.
But before we move on, I think it's important to zoom out a bit. Look at the bigger picture.
Okay, yeah. What are the global implications of this alleged attack and this possible power shift?
That's a big one. That's what we'll talk about next. Well, I think the first thing is the global economy is kind of freaking out.
Yeah.
I mean, the Middle East, that's where all the energy is, right? Any instability there and oil prices go haywire. And if things escalate even more,
oh, not good.
We could be looking at skyrocketing oil prices, like crazy economic uncertainty, Wall Street panicking. This is something everyone's going to feel no matter where they live. That's true. It definitely hits home for everyone when gas prices spike. And speaking of things hitting close to home, what about social media? It's like we're all watching this unfold in real time with all the videos and pictures and analysis popping up online.
You're so right. Open source intelligence, or OSINT, it's a total game changer. I mean, remember the old days? We had to rely on like the news or government reports to figure out what was going on. But now it's like we've got all this info coming straight from people on the ground, citizen journalists, experts sharing their thoughts instantly. It's wild.
It is pretty amazing, but also kind of overwhelming. How do we know what to believe? How do we sift through all that noise and figure out what's real?
Yeah, it's a valid concern. I mean, with tensions this high, it's easy for misinformation and propaganda to spread like wildfire. This is where critical thinking and media literacy come in. We can't just accept everything we see online. Got to check those sources, think about their biases, look for evidence.
So it's not just about missiles and who's got the bigger guns anymore. It's about winning the information war, shaping the narrative.
100%. And this is where that whole morale factor we talked about before really comes into play. Imagine seeing those videos of the attack, hearing people saying Israel messed up. It makes them look weak, not just to their enemies, but maybe even to their own people.
It all comes down to perception, doesn't it?
It totally does. Even if the actual damage wasn't that bad, the story that's being told, the narrative that Israel got stopped, that's what matters.
Especially for groups like Hezbollah.
Oh, yeah. For them, this is gold. They can use this to make themselves look stronger, get more recruits, fuel that resistance. It feeds right into their narrative that Israel is the bad guy, the aggressor.
And this brings us back to those shifting alliances. If countries in the region start to think Israel's not so tough anymore, how does that change things? Do they start cozying up to Iran?
It's complicated, right? Some countries might see this as a chance to get closer to Iran, especially if they think Russia's the new power player in town. Others might try to play both sides, wait and see what happens. It's all in flux. Everyone's trying to figure out their next move.
It's like a giant game of chess with incredibly high stakes. And speaking of stakes, what about escalation? If Iran is feeling confident, could they decide to hit back?
That's definitely a worry. Iran's not known for backing down, and if they think Russia's got their back, they might be more willing to take a risk. But on the other hand, they've got their own problems, right? Sanctions, unrest at home, political infighting. They have to think carefully. Do they retaliate and risk making things even worse?
So Iran's in a tough spot, too. They need to project strength, but they don't want to start a war.
Exactly. It's a high-stakes game of strategy, each side trying to outmaneuver the other.
And the whole world is watching.
This isn't just about Israel and Iran anymore. Russia's involved, the global economy's on edge, everyone's worried about what happens next. This could change everything.
It's crazy how one event, one alleged attack, can have such a huge ripple effect.
That's the thing about today's world. Things can change so fast. We're watching it all unfold in real time.
It's a lot to take in, that's for sure.
It really is.
Yeah.
And as we head into the last part of our deep dive, we're going to get into some of the ways this could all play out. We'll look at what could trigger a wider conflict, the chances for things to calm down, who the key players are, and how they might shape what happens next.
So we've covered a lot of ground here. We talked about the alleged attack itself, the players involved, the possibility of like a major power shift in the Middle East. But the big question is, what happens now? Where do we go from here?
Yeah, that's the question everyone's asking, right?
Yeah.
And honestly, like most things in geopolitics, there's no easy answer.
Right.
But, we can look at some possible scenarios, try to figure out what could make things better or worse.
I like that. So let's start with the scary stuff, escalation. Could this lead to a bigger conflict, maybe even a direct war between Israel and Iran?
It's definitely a risk, one that both sides are thinking about, for sure.
Yeah.
Iran might feel like they have to respond, show they won't just sit back and get attacked, especially if they think Russia will back them up.
Makes sense.
And if they do retaliate, like say they hit Israeli interests in the region, things could spiral out of control pretty quickly.
And then on the Israeli side, there's all that internal pressure we talked about, people pushing for a stronger response. If they feel like they're losing their edge, they might be tempted to launch a bigger attack, just to show everyone who's boss.
Yeah, it's a dangerous game, for sure. But, escalation isn't a given. There are also things that could help cool things down, maybe even lead to some kind of peace talks.
Okay, so what are those things? What could help ease the tension?
Well, one thing is both sides have a lot to lose if this turns into a full-blown war. Iran's already dealing with a tough economy and unrest in the streets. A war would just make things worse.
Yeah.
And while Israel has a strong military, they know a long war would be costly, both in terms of lives and money.
So there's a reason for both sides to want to avoid a huge disaster, but does that mean they're going to suddenly start being friends?
Probably not. I mean, there's a lot of history there, decades of distrust and anger. But even so, there are ways for them to communicate, back channels, quiet diplomacy happening behind the scenes.
Gotcha.
And there are people on both sides, individuals and groups, who are really dedicated to finding a peaceful way out of this mess.
They're the real heroes, right?
Totally. They're working hard, often against the odds, to build bridges and get people talking.
It makes you wonder, what can the rest of the world do to help?
Well, the international community has a big role to play here. They can pressure both sides to back down, and they can support those who are trying to bring them together.
How so?
Like they could ease up on the sanctions against Iran. That might give them a reason to negotiate. And international observers could help build trust and make sure any agreements are actually followed.
It sounds like a long shot, to be honest.
It is. It'll be a tough road, no doubt. But even small steps towards peace are important, right?
Absolutely. We can't give up hope.
We can't. The human capacity for peace is strong. It just takes the right people, the right circumstances, those moments of understanding and empathy to plant the seeds for a better future.
It's good to be reminded of that, especially when things look so bleak. Well, this has been quite a deep dive. We've gone from the initial shock of the alleged attack to talk about a possible power shift, the psychological effects, the global impact, the risks of things getting worse, and those glimmers of hope for peace. It's a lot to think about.
It is. And it just goes to show how quickly the world can change, how our assumptions can be shattered, and how important it is to stay informed and engaged.
It also reminds us that behind all the politics and strategy, there are real people whose lives are being turned upside down by these events.
Yeah, we can't forget that.
So on that note, thanks to everyone for joining us on this deep dive. We hope this has given you a better understanding of what's happening and what might happen next.
And until next time, keep asking those tough questions, keep learning, and keep working for a more peaceful world.